you have to imagine your life just change in a space of 2 weeks, and it's just upside down, and then the beliefs you had about the lives and the goals you had and things that made you happy is just gone, just stolen from you, even though you didn't do anything wrong. I mean, what's wrong about smoking a joint? And how unlucky can someone be to feel these things afterwards?
Hi everyone, I'm Sean O'Connor, author of the Depersonalization Manual, and today I am speaking to Mobin Nawabi from Munich in Germany. I'm very, very happy to be speaking to him today. So Mo had quite a scary experience with depersonalization and derealization, but he has thankfully recovered completely, and Mo is here today to tell us a little bit about his story and his recovery. So thanks for being here today, Mo. How are you doing?
No problem. I'm glad that I'm here. I'm doing fine. And as I said, at the moment I'm working and just back to my normal state, normal life. And yep.
That's great. So I'm delighted to hear it. So can you tell us a bit about yourself, Mo? Where are you from?
So yes, my name is Mo, Mubin, or Mo, as my friends call me. I'm 22 years old. I live in Munich, Germany, born and raised in here. And at the moment, I'm working in an insurance company, and I like to box. I like to play football also, and yep, that's it. Boxing and football is my passion.
Good. They're good. They're good passions.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about your maybe your experience with anxiety and DPDR, and what
No problem.
What started it off for you, and what was that experience like?
Yep. So initially I got DPDR, anxiety, through smoking weed. And it wasn't only the first week that I smoked, but it was many times. So like after the fifth or sixth time I started feeling very weird and disconnected with my surrounding. And that's when the panic attack hit me, and it just took off from there. And I experienced, I think, the whole state of my being changed in about 2 or 3 days of constant panicking. And then after the 3 days, I just found myself in a place where I just felt disconnected to my outside world, and also a little bit with myself. Yep. So it was caused through weed.
Yeah, that sounds it sounds very similar to my own experience. I remember when things first started for me, one of the scariest things was the kind of realization that, I hoped that this would go away in a couple of hours, or that I could just sleep it off. And then waking up the next morning and realizing, okay, this hasn't gone away. And also it kind of appears to be sticking around throughout the whole day. And that feeling of disconnection, of kind of feeling like I was in my parents' house and feeling like the house felt unfamiliar, and that like my family and my parents felt unfamiliar. That was a particularly scary part of it for me. Can you tell us a bit more about the symptoms you were experiencing, more kind of after that initial experience with it, kind of as the weeks went on? What was that like for you?
So the first thing that I noticed is when I felt the sudden change, it was the same feeling that I had when I was high. So I went onto the Google and typed weed, I don't know, negative side effects of weed, for instance. And what I found was many horrible things like schizophrenia and many other things like that. And that sent me to a spiral of panic attacks and anxiety. And it was, my head was very, how do you say it, like fuzzy, and my vision was blurred and I couldn't think straight. I felt that I was trapped in my own mind. It's hard to describe it for someone that doesn't know it, but people that are going through it, they can rely what I'm saying. So and there was a constant battle to feel some kind of relief, and you feel just horrible anxiety in your stomach and the hot flashes that you get in the weeks coming. So I felt my first hot flash, I think, in the second week or so, because I couldn't bear the anxiety and the symptoms kept coming and coming and coming. What were the other symptoms? As I said, blurry eyes, my vision. I thought I needed glasses for some reason. My head felt like I had a strap on my head or something is pulling my head. Neck pains, shoulder pains. I couldn't eat because I was so scared. I was weak, getting weaker day by day, and I didn't talk with my sister, with my family and girlfriend at the time. I felt I knew that these people were close to me, but I couldn't feel it. So I knew that also with derealization or depersonalization is I knew that I am existing right now, but I couldn't feel it. Like, it's very hard to describe, but yeah, I knew that everything is fine, that I am here, but the feeling of comfort and security was gone.
Yeah, yeah. That's an excellent description of it, and
Yeah.
very, very similar to what I went through. The feeling of being high when you're not high was a major thing for me as well. And because my experience had like a couple of weeks before I had the panic attack that really kicked things off me, I had a very, very bad experience on weed. And the scariest thing about the panic attack for me was that it felt like I was back in that weed headspace, even though I hadn't smoked anything, even though I hadn't taken anything. And I felt like, why do I feel like I'm high when I haven't taken anything? And obviously with DPDR, there's a very, very simple explanation for it. It's this feeling of disconnection that like 75% of people experience at some point in their lives. It's part of your body and brain's fight or flight response. It's common, it's harmless, but when you experience it and focus on it specifically, you can think, well, I feel like I'm going crazy, I'm in a dream, or I'm high, but I haven't taken anything. And then that turns into a spiral of kind of focusing on the thoughts. The thing about glasses as well, thinking you need glasses. I went to an optometrist at one point, demanding to know what was wrong with my vision, because I was seeing like floaters and tracers.
Yeah, I can relate. Yeah.
Yeah. The feeling of being trapped in your head as well, for sure. That was absolutely terrifying. Feeling like you're just kind of stuck in this kind of like, kind of robot thing that you're just
Yes.
moving around, moving through the world, but kind of watching yourself do it. Not being able to eat. I lost so much weight in the first couple of weeks with DP and DR that I had to take nutrition supplements to get something into my body, because I just couldn't look at food, and it was absolutely terrifying. But the real thing that's resonated with me that you just mentioned, Mo, was the not being able to describe it to other people.
Yeah.
Because you don't even know where to start with it. And I remember when I went to a doctor first and I tried to describe it, and I think I said something like, I feel like I'm not here, or I feel like I'm not real. And I was so frightened to tell him that, because I was thinking he's going to send me to a mental hospital by the end of the day, because what I'm describing isn't something that a sane person would describe. Now, even though he didn't recognize it immediately as like depersonalization, derealization, I mean, this was back in 2005, but he did recognize it as anxiety. And he said, it sounds to me like you're experiencing anxiety. And of course, when I heard that, I thought, well, this isn't anxiety. Like I felt anxiety before exams and stuff.
Yeah.
Like this feels different. But yeah, it was the thing of like, how can I possibly describe something that feels so profoundly bizarre to my friends and family without scaring them as much as I felt
Exactly.
scared, Yeah. And at what point, Mo, did you come across the term depersonalization or derealization? Like, was it kind of searching on Google, or did someone say it to you, or how was it?
Yeah, I saw many YouTube videos relate in relationship with weed, and I came across the term DPDR, and my symptoms were exactly the same, almost like nothing. Every person that wrote their experience with DPDR was the same thing that I was going through. So almost the same things. Maybe some people said they feel more disconnected with themselves, and some people said they feel more disconnected with the outside, but it was the same thing. So I was 100% sure that I'm going through DPDR.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was through YouTube and Google searches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's these are great resources to have when the condition is so difficult to describe. I don't know if this was your experience as well, Mo, but for me, when I found the term and realized, okay, there's actually a word to describe what I'm going through, my first reaction was like,
Amazing.
I was overjoyed.
Yeah.
And then I started reading about this and read that there was, oh, okay, there's people out there who've had this for like 5 years and 10 years. And I was
That
going,
was horrible. That
yeah,
that was
yeah,
the lowest points. It was. I just got a hope that now I know what it is. Finally, it was about, I don't know, the next 5 days after I got the first panic attack, and I was joyful. I was like, finally I found it. I know what it is. And then I just went through these videos that people are saying, yep, it's my second year still with DPDR, and I was like, oh my god, there's no coming out of this. And other testimonies that people are like stuck in this for 10 and 15 years. It just sent me to, yeah, very
yeah,
bad place.
yeah, yeah. I was absolutely the same. I remember thinking to myself, I've had this for maybe it had been like 2 months at that stage. And reading people have had this for
Mm.
like 10 years. And I thought like, I can't do this. And it's such a common experience, but it's what's really interesting that is that like after recovery, when you kind of like look back on that and look at it from a kind of a scientific perspective or a practical
Yeah.
perspective, and what you're actually seeing is the fact that people get anxiety-based conditions, and it takes some people longer than others to get out of them. The reason it takes some people longer than others is for like so many different reasons.
Yeah.
Like for example, with like take something like claustrophobia or agoraphobia, like extremely common anxiety-based conditions. They're absolutely treatable. People get these and recover from them all the time. But does that mean that there aren't people out there who have had it for 5 years, like for 10 years? I mean, like of course
Yeah.
there are.
Yeah.
It may be because they had been like misdiagnosed at the beginning, because they got into like I did for a long time with DP and DR. I got into habits that weren't helpful. I was like avoiding work. I was avoiding going back to college, which I wanted to do. I just kind of started like living at home with my parents and just researching the condition all day. People get into these loops that kind of cause the condition to persist for quite some time. But essentially, all that demonstrates is that people get these conditions for different periods of time.
Yeah. True.
But at no point does anybody cross a line after which they can't recover. Like it doesn't matter how long you've had this or what caused it in the first place. It's always possible
That's
to
so true.
recover.
Yes.
Yeah, but I absolutely understand what you're saying. I mean, I still remember like looking through a forum back in 2005 and seeing people that had it for years and thinking, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
scary, very, very,
I
very
mean,
scary
I mean,
period.
I just went. I think it was yesterday or something like that. I just went to the old forums that I always checked, and people that they haven't recovered. It's like funny now, but at that time, the denial of them, the experience that they had having this for many years was very bad for me. I just was. I didn't had any hope after reading these forums. I thought reading these forums and gathering more information was helping me, but it was the opposite.
Yeah, yeah. Might be a bit of a tough question, Mo. I hope you don't mind my
No
asking.
problem.
But for you, what was the lowest point in the whole experience for you?
Wow. Let me think for a bit. The lowest point was it was the first 2 weeks, I think. It was the first 2 weeks before I found your book and before I knew what this was, going through the forums and thinking that I will have it for many years. And that was I'm trying to describe it as best as I can so people can rely. Um, you have to imagine your life just change in a space of 2 weeks, and it's just upside down, and then the beliefs you had about the lives and the goals you had, and things that made you happy is just gone, just stolen from you, even though you didn't do anything wrong. I mean, what's wrong about smoking a joint? And how unlucky can someone be to feel these things afterwards? So yeah, and what I felt in those moments is hard to describe, because no one in that moment could understand me, what I was going through. So I was craving for someone to understand me, and I was just going to these forums and making it worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And yeah, it was a dark place. I mean, uh, it's not nice to be in there. So I don't wish anyone going through that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, I can, and I can relate to that absolutely as well. For me, it was something very similar. It was, I remember, I remember at one point, like grieving for the person that I was.
I can rely. That's grieving after, for the one you were before all of that. I just thought I will never get that man again. The one person I was before it, that's gone. It's
Yeah,
never
yeah,
coming back.
yeah. I remember thinking, so I mean, so I work in film now, and I direct um stuff for film and TV and such. And I remember thinking, you know, I always wanted to work in film. It's my dream. I love movies. I love working with people.
Yeah,
How on earth am I going to direct a crew of like 30 or 40 people when I can't walk to the bathroom without having a panic attack because I'm afraid to look in the mirror, because
yeah,
looking in the mirror absolutely terrifies me. So I was like, well, all that's gone. All the traveling the world, that's gone. Working in film, that's gone. Going to music festivals, that's all gone. It's all gone. It's all gone. I remember sitting down and I wept. I was just heartbroken. I thought this and feeling kind of weirdly numb about it, because you feel disconnected from what's happening, but also
yes,
profoundly sad about it. Um, yeah, it was very
yeah.
very difficult.
It's very sad. It's not only just anxiety. You feel a deep sadness in you. It's horrible. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and also for I mean something that is kind of brings a smile to my face when I look back at it. But I remember like looking at other people working like office jobs and being so jealous of them, and thinking like I would love to just work some like a 9 to 5
Yeah.
job, and just so I wouldn't have to think about these
Yeah.
thoughts, like, because, and also I would think, like, I was going around all day thinking thoughts about like the nature of reality, and about
Yeah.
like like I'd look at my dog and think, what's the dog's consciousness like? How is the dog experiencing the world? And that would absolutely freak me out, and it would set
Yeah.
me, and I'd have a panic attack about it, like, and
Yeah,
then
it's so hard to describe this feeling. It's just a usual thing. You just wake up and you watch something, and you just can't understand or explain it, because there's a disconnection between the feelings, and you can't really grasp what's going on, even though
yeah,
it's just something casual as watching your dog, or I don't know,
yeah,
just random stuff, and just freak out about it.
absolutely. And then certain things that like would absolutely like always set me off. So like the Matrix, for example, which is one of my favorite films.
Yeah.
But like if I saw a clip from that film, it would just set me off in a panic attack, because it felt like it was close to this idea of like reality not being reality, or kind of being stuck in a dream, or in a kind of a computer program that you couldn't wake up from, or this kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it would just absolutely set off the feelings of panic.
It's
Um,
funny that you mentioned that. I was just you think about this condition in so many ways. Yeah, it's just amazing. It's you're bombarding yourself with these thoughts constantly, and I was thinking sometimes I would sacrifice my little pinky to just I would even sacrifice my hand to just be healthy again. I'm
My
willing
God.
to do that. These thoughts is something that I had. So you think just in so many ways that you have stupid thoughts like that even.
Yeah, yeah. One of my ones as well was, I wish I'd gotten something more serious. Like, if this was, I mean, God, like, God forgive me, but like, if this was cancer,
Hmm.
like at least with cancer, I
You have a
go to the
treatment.
hospital and there's a set treatment for
Yeah.
this. So somebody looks at me, diagnoses me, and says, "Okay, Sean, here's what you have to do. It might be difficult, but here's a plan for you."
Yeah.
Whereas with DP and DR, it just felt like I was completely on my own with it. It felt like there was nobody to speak to. It felt like, I mean, I know this has definitely changed since 2005 when I had it, but when I
Hmm.
had it, I mean, I don't, I never spoke to any medical professional who
Hmm.
really understood it. Like, um, it was incredibly frustrating. But yeah, I remember thinking that. I was like, God, if only I'd had something way more serious than this. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I fully
um,
understand.
yeah, for sure. So with all that said, Mo, how did your recovery start, and what was the process involved in that?
So I found you on YouTube and I saw your book. I just felt an urge to buy the book because I just could I watched the videos and it just spoke to me, and it just described what I was going through, and you said that you're completely recovered, which gave me tremendous hope. So I knew if he done it, I it's only one option. I have to get out of this. So I just bought the book. I read the book many times, and we had obviously some calls where some personal coaching, which I went with you, and you helped me through these steps. And yeah, that's when my recovery started, to treat the anxiety, to know that this is anxiety and not something horrible or something special only for me, that no one has it. Or maybe I had always the thoughts that every person has it uh, in a special way on their own. So some method might work for another, but not for another person. So yeah, after I got rid of these thoughts through the book, I knew that this was anxiety, and I just treated the right way, as you was saying it and well written in the book.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that the book and the material was useful. Yeah, that was, I know, oh, that sounds very familiar to me as well in terms of my own recovery. It was like, for me, it, there came a point for me in my recovery where I I remember saying to myself, and this was like well over a year into it. This is probably like a year and a half into near constant DP and DR. But saying to myself, um, I'm just so tired of these thoughts. I'm so sick of listening to myself think of these thoughts. I remember thinking, like, I'm somebody who enjoys movies,
Mhm.
music, and books, and socializing, and art, and all these different things. And I'm not doing any of those things. And instead, I am sitting around all day, freaking myself out, thinking about the nature of reality and about, am I stuck in a dream and all these different things. And it kind of went from a point of being terrified of the thoughts to being more frustrated with them, and just being like, no, I'm going to get my life back. So, and also because I had come across stories of people who had recovered.
Mhm.
And often the frustrating thing about people who have recovered is that they're not on the forums anymore, because that's kind of a part of recovery, is that
Yeah.
you do have to kind of extricate yourself
Yeah.
from discussing it every day.
I see that in myself. When I got better, I hadn't had the urge to. I mean, I wanted to share my success, but you're just not there anymore. Maybe you just write a success story and that's it. You just go on back to your normal life and live it
Yeah,
just as it was before.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's an example I always like to give when I'm speaking to people about it, and it's always like, and I'm sure I said it to you at some point as well, Mo, where it's like, um people get anxiety based conditions and recover from them, every day of the week.
Yeah.
They are the most common things in the world. They're harmless and they're temporary, and DPDR is one of them. People who are recovered from anxiety-based conditions are not walking around high-fiving each other saying, isn't it great that I don't feel
Yeah,
anxiety or
exactly.
DPDR anymore? And the reason they're not doing that is because it has nothing to do with them anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, these thoughts and feelings are useful for a very, very short period. When your body and brain think that you're in danger, when they think that they need to have a fight or flight response happening.
Yeah.
So when they're gone, they're gone. And it's part of understanding that you simply don't need to have them around anymore. So people who are recovered, you know, they're not walking around saying, isn't it fantastic that I don't feel anxiety? And the reason they're not doing that is because they're listening to an audiobook or a
Yeah.
podcast, or
Yeah.
they're playing a game on their phone or something, you know. And
Yeah.
that's what kind of recovery moves towards. But again, getting back to the thing of like people being off the forums who are recovered, but sometimes people will leave messages on the forums just saying, okay, I'm feeling, I'm recovered. I'm leaving the forums. It's great, great. And I did that when I left the
Mm-hmm.
forums. I left a
Yeah.
final message just saying, look, it was lovely to meet you. And I made really good friends there. But I said, I have to leave for my own health
Exactly. Yeah.
and leaving. But I had come across stories of people who had recovered on the forums. And that really kind of inspired me. And I said, okay, look, all I need to know is that it's possible. If it's possible for these other people, it has to be possible for me. And then anxiety starts to say, yeah, but you're different from those people. Your story is different from those people. Like you got it, you know, from a couple of different factors, maybe.
Yeah.
So what if you have different type of DPDR and you can't recover? So it turns into a whole other thing. But then you learn to, part of recovery is learning to identify those thoughts when they happen and say, no, that's anxiety.
Yeah.
I can recover, and being as disciplined as possible with that process.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. I can rely on that. I was the same. I just thought those who recovered are just special kind of specimen, and I don't know. The majority of the people suffering from the PNDR are not able to get out of it. And yeah, but then it just happened, you know. I just sticked to the rules and everything that I went through with you in the coachings and the calls and in the book. So yeah, and applied it and just worked like a charm.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. It's always it's such a common thing with all anxiety based conditions is that, like, you know, even when you find out that people have recovered from it, you know, it's like take someone with like agoraphobia, for example.
Yes.
You know, when if somebody has agoraphobia for, you know, a couple of months or a year or two or something, and then they meet somebody who has recovered and says, okay, no, you can recover, it'll be fine. You know, their reaction is not going to be, oh great, that's great news, I can
Yeah.
recover, thanks a million. No, it's the reaction is going to be, okay, that's great that you've recovered, but mine's different. I like mine happened because I had a panic attack on the subway.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mine's
Yeah.
different from yours because you had yours on a plane, and it's different. Mine was really bad, like, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, there's always that kind of, and I absolutely had this with DP and DR. I had it.
Absolutely. Also. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I was so convinced that I had that my case of DP and DR was the worst that anybody had ever had it in history, and that the people who had recovered, they mustn't have had it as bad as I had it, because because I couldn't see myself recovering from what I had. Or what I thought was, I'll recover, but I'll never be able to get on a plane again. Or I'll recover, but I'll never be able to watch The Matrix again.
There's always a but.
There's,
Something.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is, as you actually recover, you realize that that's not recovery. It's not recovery with an asterisk or a proviso. Like, recovery is recovery. It is actually getting back to normal.
Yes, that was something I always told something to myself. I said, if it's possible to go from a normal state to a state bad like this, horrible like this, it should be possible to go back to normal state. And it's something that
Absolutely.
I always told myself. And there's no ifs, buts, or maybes. It's just back to complete recovery like you were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's like a really good example I like to use is always like somebody who's going through a panic attack. And let's say a panic attack lasts 15 minutes, okay? And in that 10-15 minutes, the person having the panic attack, they're 100% certain that they're going to die, that they're going crazy, that they'll never get out of this, that this is the worst thing that's ever happened to anybody in the
Yeah.
history of the planet, right? And the thing is that when the panic attack finishes, what happens? They finish their shopping. Now they might be a bit shaken, of course, and
Of course.
certainly it's not a pleasant experience, but the panic attack passes and you just kind of get back to doing what you were doing and you realize, okay, I didn't die, I didn't go crazy. And it's essentially the same thing with recovery from any anxiety-based condition, and certainly with DPDR, is that when you're going through it, and especially uh, looking at the symptoms through a filter of anxiety. So, for example, like with the loss of appetite, for example, is a good example.
Yeah.
So loss of appetite. So my first reaction was, oh, I have some sort of horrible wasting disease. So I'm just going to, I can't eat food anymore, and I'm going to lose all my my body mass. I'm just going to fade away and die.
Yeah.
The reason I couldn't eat was because that's what happens with anxiety. You're not, people lose their appetite. I thought I'd never be able to sleep properly again. I was having horrible nightmares because that's what happens with anxiety.
Yeah, it was the same with me. I remember almost it was a time after reading the book and knowing what I had to do. I was making progress, but at some point I just got this idea that I'm bipolar. I know, I don't know how. I just thought, okay, I have these down phases, but I also have these good phases, so it must mean that I'm some kind of bipolar. So I just entertained that thought, and I just panicked again. Yeah,
Yeah,
so this is just anxiety. So
yeah,
people going through schizophrenic people, when they are schizophrenic, they don't panic about it. They just have this condition, that's it. But as a DP and DR person, you just panic about having something which you don't. So the main problem is the panicking about that problem, not the problem. So that's the underlying issue,
mm,
which it passes and you just don't realize, which is anxiety.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if I was to go through the list of conditions that I thought I had at different times, like we'd be here till next week. Like
Yeah,
Mo, I thought I had everything. I thought at one point I thought I had Alzheimer's. I was 25 years
that
old
was a
and I,
main that
and
was
I thought
also
I
a
had
main
Alzheimer's.
fear of mine, that I will just develop Alzheimer's, but because my memory was so bad, I just couldn't remember anything, and
Yeah,
not clearly. And that was a main reason why I panicked at my initial panic after smoking weed was that I might develop Alzheimer's.
yeah, absolutely. And it's such a great example of like the most annoying thing or most frustrating thing about anxiety is that when you're going through it first, is that you experience the symptoms of anxiety through the filter of anxiety. So that, like, when you're reading for example, and your anxiety is high and your thoughts are racing and you're catastrophizing and it's hard to focus. In the same way that if you were being chased by a bear through the forest and your fight or flight response was up and you sat down and tried to read a book, it'd be very hard to focus on it because your body and brain are not primed to do that at that time. They're not relaxed, your thoughts are racing, you're catastrophizing. So when you sit down to read a book and you can't focus on it, there's a very, very simple reason. It's just that your focus is temporarily a little bit scattershot,
Yeah,
a little bit all over the place. That's all. But when you're going through that, through the filter of anxiety, your first thought is, I've got Alzheimer's. I'm losing my memory. I'm going crazy. Another one was I'm losing my ability to read. I can't read. I'll soon forget how to read words, and then I'll forget how to
Yeah.
how to speak. You know, these massive catastrophic conclusions when all that was happening was I was finding it hard to read because my anxiety was causing my thoughts to race. That's it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it. And the same thing goes for all the symptoms that go with it. But again, this is one of the loveliest parts of recovery is getting a more practical perspective on that experience and saying, okay, that's why that happened. That's why I had trouble reading. That's why I was
Yeah.
having like memory problems. That's why I was having visual issues and went to the eye doctor. There's very simple explanations for all these when you break them down. But and so Mo, can you tell me a little bit about like what the actual kind of the feeling of recovery, kind of getting back to normal, kind of getting back to normal routine daily life? How was that for you, and how is that for you?
So I think I'm now recovered for about 6 months, 5 6 months now.
Right.
And yeah, it's amazing because at first you think you just flip the switch and you can't turn it back off. And in the recovery or at the end of the recovery, you just have a grip for it and you just know what to do. It's literally flicking a switch off. It's developing this skill to just flip the switch off and keep it off, and the switch will not exist at some point. And that's how I felt. And I always thought that when I recover, I will be so happy. I will just be cheering and crying out of joy. But that was not the case. I just forget about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the case. So I mean, people might be shocked, but that's the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. When I remember saying to myself when I had DP and DR, thinking to myself, if I ever get out of this, like every day is going to be Christmas. Like I'm going to party for about 10 years, and like I'm just going to grow and hugging people. It's if
Yeah.
I ever get out of this.
Yeah.
And when I did recover, like the first thing I was concerned about was like I need to like get out of my parents' place. Like I need to start paying rent. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need to pay the insurance on my car because I haven't driven it. It was that kind of thing. But it was like you so quickly get back to normal
Yeah.
life. But it's lovely. It's very
It's lovely.
yeah,
It's amazing. It's amazing. You just get back to your healthy life that you had before, without any buts, anything different. And I always thought that going through this condition, I might develop a deeper meaning of life, or some I don't know, awakening, or being more tough. And it's just you're back the same. Nothing
yeah,
changes really. Not about you, not within you, not outside of you. You just back to normal without the constant thoughts and the anxiety, and
yeah,
you're just in comfort and secure, which will be the case
yeah,
if
yeah.
you do the things right.
So how was the DP manual in particular helpful in your recovery?
What I found the most important thing about DP manual is that it resonated with me. It just spoke from my from my soul. It just described everything so clear that I had a tremendous amount of relief. I felt so much relief that I went for the next some days. I just was calm and secure. It's just described from someone going through it, and it describes every detail and every symptom that you're going through. And at first, of course, it's sharing the story and going through the symptoms, and then after that, you bring the tips and the things how to deal with it. It for me, personally, I found it. I mean, without help and your guidance, wouldn't be able to be right now in the place I am. It gets very personal, so you share your own information, and this touches me, like it touches the people that are going through the same thing. It's a deeper connection, and you kind of know that you will recover after reading the book, because there's so much personal information shared and so much connection between the reader and the writer. And yeah, you just know that this will get you out of DPDR, so you just know it after finishing the book, even not using any tips and things that are mentioned in the book. Just yep, it's a huge sense of security that you get after really. Yeah.
Good. That's good. That's great. That's great. I'm glad to hear it. So I guess that's everything I wanted to ask, Mo. It was an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I would say enjoy your recovery, but you're already recovered, so you're
Yeah,
recovered. So enjoy everything about your life post DPDR, and yeah,
I
look
will.
for
I will
yeah
definitely. Yeah.
yeah. So
Perfect.
please do stay in touch and keep me up to date with all your future
I will.
endeavors,
I
be
will.
it but boxing or football or
Of
whatever's
course.
happening.
I hope
Yeah,
we see us one day in Ireland. I will visit Ireland. Yeah.
you must do.
I
Come over and have a
must.
pint, like.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah. Okay. Great to chat with you, Mo. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Okay.
Bye bye.
Yeah. Take care.
Perfect.
All the best.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thanks, Mo.